They all called him crazy until a decorated Marine walked in and hugged him without saying a word. What that officer revealed next left the entire diner frozen in silence. Every morning, just as the clock above the counter ticks to 8:10 a.m., the bell above the door at Maple Leaf Diner gives a soft jingle, and he walks in. Tall, tired eyes, and a faded gray coat that's seen too many winters. He doesn't speak, doesn't smile, just walks slowly to the corner booth by the window, the same seat every time, and lowers himself into it like the weight on his shoulders grows heavier by the day. He doesn't carry a phone, never opens a book, doesn't glance at the TV playing behind the counter. Instead, he waits. Just a few seconds. Then, with slow, practiced hands, he reaches into the inside of his coat and pulls out a folded, worn photograph. One edge is torn. The ink has faded, but he looks at it like it holds his entire world. The waitress, Karen, brings his black coffee, no cream, no sugar without asking. He nods gently in thanks. Never more than that. Then he stares out the window as the steam rises from his cup, and time around him seems to slow down. Locals whisper when he walks in. Some call him the ghost. Others say he's just a lonely man stuck in his past. The young ones laugh behind their hands, daring each other to ask him who's in the photo. A couple of kids once approached, giggling. "Hey mister," one said, "is that your lost girlfriend?" But he didn't even blink, didn't move, just kept his eyes on the picture and then tucked it back into his coat. Quiet as ever, no one really knows his name. No one knows where he goes after he leaves. All they know is that he's there every single morning, rain, snow, or shine. Always 8:10, always black coffee, always the photograph. Some say he's waiting for someone who never came home. Others think he's just lost his mind, but here's what no one dares say out loud. Not yet. There's something about the way he sits, the way he carries that old coat, and the way he looks at that picture. It's not random, it's not routine, it's something else, something deeper, like a storm that's never stopped inside him. In that photo, it's not just a memory, it's a secret. A story buried so far under silence that only one person still carries it, the man in the booth, the one they laugh at, the one they call crazy. But they don't know they're about to find out. The fog outside was thick that Tuesday morning, rolling across the Halifax streets like slow-moving waves. Inside the Maple Leaf Diner, things felt like any other decorator wiped down the counter. Old Mr. Taylor complained about the toast being cold again, and a radio played soft jazz in the background. The quiet man in the corner, as always, had arrived at 8:10 a.m. sharp. He sat in his usual spot, stared at the same torn photograph, and sipped his black coffee, alone and unnoticed by most. But that day wasn't going to be like the others. At exactly 8:27 a.m., the soft hum of conversation was interrupted by the sudden glare of headlights cutting through the fog. A black military SUV pulled up outside the diner. Its doors opened slowly, and out stepped a tall man in a perfectly pressed Canadian Marine dress uniform. The medals on his chest gleamed. His boots hit the pavement with purpose. No one had seen him before, but everyone could tell this man was someone important. He opened the diner door, and a small bell rang overhead, just like it always did. But this time, the room fell quiet. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The man scanned the diner calmly, like he was looking for someone he hadn't seen in years. And then he walked. Not to the counter, not to a booth, but straight to the silent man in the faded coat. Everyone stared. The man in uniform didn't speak. He didn't smile. He simply knelt down beside the quiet man, and without a word, wrapped his arms around him. A long, deep hug. Not quick, not polite, but full of something that no one in that room could quite explain. It wasn't just respect. It was something more like reunion, like forgiveness, like pain finally finding peace. A single gasp escaped from somewhere near the counter. A spoon clinked softly into a saucer. For the first time in forever, even the teens in the back corner stopped whispering. And then, slowly, the officer stood, turned toward the frozen room, and in a low, steady voice said the words no one was ready for. "You all laughed at the man who saved my life." No one moved. Rick the cook in the back dropped a spatula. The old man who always played cards in the corner wiped his eyes. Even Karen, tough as nails Karen, just stood there, hand over her heart. The man in the coat hadn't changed, but in that moment, everything else had. The moment the officer placed the medal on the table, it was like the entire diner took a deep breath together. No one moved. The clink of that metal against the wood sounded louder than all the chatter that had filled the place for years. The man in the faded coat didn't look up right away. He simply stared at the metal for a moment, his hands trembling slightly, as if it brought back the weight of things he had tried to bury deep inside. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched it, not like it was a prize, but like it was a reminder of things too big to explain. His eyes never left it, and the Marine officer just stood there, silent, his shoulders tight, like holding back something that had waited years to be said. A waitress, the same one who'd served him coffee every morning for months, wiped a tear from her cheek. No one had ever seen him speak more than 2 words, but now his silence meant something more. It wasn't strange anymore. It wasn't lonely. It was noble. It was brave. People in the diner looked at each other, unsure of what to do, ashamed of how easily they'd judged him, how quick they were to label someone they didn't understand. Even the teens who used to whisper behind his back stared at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. Then, the Marine officer gently said, "Sir, they called you crazy, but I called you when I thought I was going to die, and you came." With that, he took a small patch from his pocket, the insignia of their old unit, and tucked it beside the medal. The man finally looked up, and for the first time anyone could remember, he smiled. It wasn't big, it wasn't bright, but it was real. After that day, the man still came to the diner every morning. Same seat, same coffee, same silence. But now, people nodded at him when he walked in. Some shook his hand. Others simply let him be, but with eyes full of quiet respect. No more names, no more whispers. They didn't need to understand everything. They just knew enough. And there, by the window, sat the man who once walked through fire and came back not for medals, not for thanks, but because it was right. Now, they called him what he truly was. A quiet hero who never needed to speak to be heard. Sometimes, the quietest people carry the loudest stories of courage, sacrifice, and pain they never speak of. Today, a single moment reminded an entire town that true heroes don't wear fame, they carry it in silence. If this story touched you, don't scroll away. Hit the like button, share it with someone who still believes in real heroes, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that deserve to be heard.